Welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show, episode 2400 today of the Cabral Concept. It is a Training Thursday show, but today's absolutely going to be a bit of a hybrid-based show because we're going to be going over the early warning signs of everyday dehydration. This is something that affected me back in the day, certainly through my younger years. I'll explain why, and all through my teenage years as well. And it's not what you think. It's not just about consuming more water. There's an actual reason behind drinking enough water and still being dehydrated. I'm going to share that with you here today. I hope that it saves someone from having to deal with a lot of the symptoms that you may not even know about that go along with dehydration, because you might be saying to yourself, well, I'm drinking enough water, so I can't be dehydrated. So let's dive right into today's show. I'm going to put all of the three big takeaways, as well as any research you need, any other links that you need at stephencabral.com/2400. That is today's show on dehydration. So one of the reasons why this first came about, not even based on, consuming enough water and still your cells, your tissues are dehydrated, was that, or I should say, is that I love teaching people about sauna. I love teaching people about hot and cold based therapy, which one is right for what individual. I enjoy talking about intermittent fasting. I enjoy talking about functional medicine detoxes. All these different things are great for the human body. Again, when you overdo them, then they're bad, right? And so we always have to understand those nuances, and there's a lot of bio-individuality within all of these things. But, getting some type of heat therapy is good for pretty much anybody. Now, for some people with dysautonomia or chronic fatigue or Addison's or maybe even Cushing's on the other side of the spectrum, or even hypothyroidism, you don't want to overdo it because it's very taxing on the nervous system, right? It's a lot of stress on the body, just like long fast would be stress on the body. Now, if your body's strong, well, it could deal with more, right? I mean, that's hopefully as we're starting to learn that, I'm trying to teach that more and more on the Cabral Concept, that there can't be this all for one philosophy. Everybody should do keto. Everybody should go low carb. Well, no, they shouldn't actually, because it's a greater stress on the body. So if it works for you and your body's strong, well, if you want to push it that hard all the time, every single day, okay, well, then that's up to you. And again, more power to you. Then that's great for you. So what I'm just trying to teach is the certain nuances that go along with all these different biohacking or natural health-based modalities. Because again, conventional medicine doesn't really have too much nuance. It's like, well, you have high cholesterol, take this statin. You have high blood pressure, take this beta blocker, calcium channel blocker, diuretic, whatever it might be, right? And so there's not a lot of nuance, and that's the reason why it doesn't work very well, right? It just masks symptoms. Well, at least with natural health, we're trying to get to the bottom of it, the root cause, but unless you do some type of at-home lab testing, it's nearly impossible. I mean, it really is, because you just have to go through all the different variables and test them all individually, and it just takes so long. So you can do it. It's not like you can't. You certainly can, but I spent 10 years up and down, and it wasn't until I actually started to figure out what was going on inside of my body that I was able to fix it. So, I want to share with you this. Here are the main reasons why you can become dehydrated outside of what I'm going to talk about in just a moment. So one, you just might not be drinking enough water, right? So you have to check that off your list. Think about it this way. And I didn't really understand this until I started teaching nutrition. I was about 19 years old. I was working with personal training clients, but a big part of my niche within fitness was really nutrition. And that's what I did a lot of work with. Well, not just my clients, but I was fortunate enough that other personal trainers that I got to know knew me. They knew I wasn't trying to take their clients. It's never what I've been about. But I would work with them just on their nutrition, and their personal trainer would work with them on their programs. And that was a nice, again, I love that. I always talk about it, but it's just, that's what this industry should be about. I don't provide chiropractic care, acupuncture, all sorts of different things that I have a knowledge of, but I'm not the expert in those. And I simply just say, hey, listen, you might want to look into active release therapy. You might want to look into gua sha or Graston, whatever you like to call it. You might want to work with this person on functional range conditioning. So I just think that, again, there's so many great synergies within this space. We don't have to be the end all be all ourselves. Okay, so think about it this way. You stop drinking water maybe at like 8 o'clock at night, right? If you're going to bed at 10, maybe you stop drinking a couple hours before bed. Okay, great. Well, you wake up the next morning, you're just continuing your fast. A lot of people, they don't drink anything until their morning cup of coffee. And maybe it's at like 7:30, 8 when they're leaving for work or so. Okay, you just went 12 hours. You went a half a day with no water. Your body's about 2/3 water. We can go back and forth about different tissue compartments and what holds the most water, but we don't have to. It's about 2/3 water, right? So when we look at it, just 1 or 2% weight loss, as you can see in the morning, is dehydration, right? So like, think about it. You weigh way less in the morning than you weigh, not way less, but you weigh a couple percent less in the morning than you weigh at night. Now, some of it's normal. Some of it's just dehydration overnight because you lose anywhere from like a half to 1 liter of fluid overnight just through normal perspiration. But there's other reasons why for a lot of weight gain through the day, it can be weight gain by the end of the day. It can be bloating and water retention and inflammation and food sensitivities and, gut-based issues. So that's a different story. I actually did a podcast on that. If you want to find that podcast, my team can certainly help. You can just ask them at cabralsupportgroup.com. They'll find any podcast you want, 2,400 podcasts. There's a topic on it. Trust me. I'm sure that I've done one on it. And if not, we'll do one for you. So again, 12 hours a day, not consuming any water. That's why when you wake up, drink water, add a little lemon to it, add a pinch of sea salt if you want, add your daily fruit and vegetable blend, add your alkalizing vitamin C, which has electrolytes, those types of things. I'll be talking about that a little bit later in the show. That's up to you, but just get some fluid in your body before you do your black tea, your caffeinated product, your coffee, right? Again, new research is coming out showing that caffeine will dehydrate you if you are not used to consuming it. But then you seem to hit a tipping point as to when your body's used to consuming it with a certain amount of water that you're not doing further dehydration. You're basically just maintaining your hydration level. So that's interesting research. And it's not necessarily new, but it's certainly been confirmed. Now, if you're not someone that's used to drinking caffeine and you do some caffeine, you'll definitely increase urination and you will increase your dehydration as well. Okay, so sauna, we talked about that. Anything, right? Your exercise, sauna, whatever you are. When you are sweating to a greater degree, you're losing more fluid. You can become dehydrated. Exercise, I just chatted about that. Mild exercise to a degree, right? To a degree, but not massive amounts. It's interesting, but if we start to lower our blood sugar level, it can actually change our hydration levels because of how the body intuitively knows what type of glucose level it's supposed to maintain in the blood. I'll talk about that in just a moment because I dealt with type 2 diabetes to a degree when I was a teenager, and certainly I have some knowledge of this. Diuretics is another one, and some people might just be taking diuretics. Another one is medications. It's always good to just say, whatever medication you're on, just, again, today, just type into Google, whatever the medication you're is. Let's just say levothyroxine. Okay, so levothyroxine side effects. Just literally type it in and just see what the side effects are. Or type in levothyroxine and dehydration. Just see if there's any connection. All right. It's good to know what medications might cause what issues. And then again, there are other risk factors for dehydration. One of them, just keep in mind, is that diabetes, which I just mentioned, can increase dehydration. So I'll just give you a quick little excerpt. When I was dealing with Addison's disease, again, undiagnosed at the time, I couldn't regulate cortisol levels in my body. It was basically low levels of cortisol. So what would happen is that when your blood sugar levels begin to lower to anything below basically a 70, that your body would just produce enough cortisol, enough norepinephrine, and then enough cortisol in order to tell your body, because it's a glucocorticoid, to break down some stored sugar in your liver. It's just some stored glycogen. It would break it down. It makes it into glucose. And then the glucose, the sugars in your bloodstream. And then you get to use that. It's not a massive spike unless you're on a lot of stress, but it's enough to bring it back up so that you don't pass out, so you don't get too lightheaded. I'll share the symptoms in just a moment. Well, when you have Addison's disease, you can't produce glucocorticoids. And that's why you feel like a zombie, but also it can lead to dysregulated blood sugar. So a lot of people say, how did you have type 2 diabetes when you didn't fit any of the basically criteria for getting type 2 diabetes. And the issue was, it was, again, that people, it's not people, like not us, not everyday people, but it's endocrinologists, which are your medical doctors that have a basis in conventional medicine. They really need to understand things to a more holistic level. And it's just not taught that way in medical school. So I had Addison's disease, but there was there was never a discussion about how Addison's disease could lead to diabetes. And, I wish that there was, of course, because I would consume one huge glass of water, and I've shared this before, after another huge glass of water. My mother would just be like horrified watching me do this. I saw her expression. I still know it to this day. I remember it. I would drink 3 16-ounce to 20-ounce glasses of water. I remember the red dimpled cup to this day in plastic cup, and I would just fill it up, drink it down, fill it up, drink it down, just out of my refrigerator water. And I just could not quench my thirst, right? And so you have to understand is that was never going to be quenched. It couldn't. Like I was not able to get that into my cells, and I'll share that again in just one moment. But just 2 more, cystic fibrosis and then kidney disease also can increase your dehydration risks. So what does it feel like when you're everyday dehydrated? Not just like, oh, wow, I'm feeling really thirsty right now. Okay, well, sure. The first sign of dehydration is, no, I shouldn't say this is the first sign, but a sign of dehydration is thirst and lightheaded. But the interesting thing is by the time you get thirsty, you are dehydrated. I mean, to a degree. Are we talking about like serious dehydration? No. But if you are thirsty, you've gotten to the point where your body's slightly dehydrated. It's just something to think about. Like we don't need to wait to consume fluid if we're like just waiting for thirst. You don't need to wait till you're thirsty in order to drink some fluid. I think that's an important one I think to keep in mind. Most people per day, about half their body weight in ounces per day spread over the day. So 160 pounds, you drink about 80 ounces of water. And that's about 10 glasses of water throughout the day. Smoothies count, herbal tea counts, water obviously counts. Like those things count. And so it's not hard to do when you look at it. And I typically front load my day before 1 p.m. is the majority of the fluid for my day. So it's like basically it's 2/3 of my water. And then I have less as the day progresses because I'm rehydrating from me not consuming water after like basically 7 o'clock at night till I guess it's around 7 in the morning, so 12 hours. So I'm rehydrating over that period of time. All right, so dry mouth is another one. That can, again, be from multiple things, sympathetic nervous system dominance, etc. Lightheadedness, headaches, tiredness. Okay, so lethargy, brain fog, low mood. These can all be from dehydration. Your body's literally shutting down energy because it does not have the fluid, which is essentially what carries everything through your body. Right? I mean, your blood is predominantly made of water. And so we have to look at it that way too. I've talked about this before, what your urine should look like. I'm happy to link up that show today at episode 2400. But if you have dark colored urine or it has a strong smell to it, typically it means you're dehydrated. It can also mean that you're breaking down proteins, muscle tissue. That's not good, of course, but you never want dark colored urine. And then if you're not finding yourself urinating throughout the day, it's a sign that you're most likely dehydrated. Like if you urinate once every like 3 or 4 hours, most likely you're dehydrated. Every hour, 2 hours, it's normal to have to urinate. It really is. So if you're urinating like twice a day, 3 times a day, probably too few. Probably dehydrated, right? Again, are we talking about dangerous levels of dehydration? No, you're hydrated, but you're not optimal. Most likely you're not optimal. Now, when I had type 2 diabetes, I was urinating like, I don't even know, like 20, 30 times a day. Like it was outrageous, completely outrageous, multiple times per hour. And I couldn't absorb anything. So again, just 1 second, we'll get to that part. But most common feeling dehydrated is basically like a little lightheaded, slight headache maybe, sometimes even a little eye strain, a little fuzzy thinking, and feeling a little dizzy, dry mouth dizziness. So those are the most common. It starts to get worse as you get more headache, more lightheaded, And again, this can be low blood pressure, it can be multiple things, and sometimes they're both. So just keep that in mind. If dehydration becomes chronic, then you can end up having kidney-based dysfunction, and you can increase your risk of kidney stones. It can also lead to constipation because literally your body will reabsorb water from your stool and your colon. That does happen if it needs it, and that can lead to constipation. So that's why we always work, when we're working with people with constipation, we're kind of just like rattling off the list. Like, what about this? What about this? What about this? We work through those things, a little bit of decreasing sympathetic nervous system dominance, improving certain factors, and that helps the constipation. So hopefully that was helpful. The last part is this, and this is ultimately what helped me and still helps me to this day. So if you are more of a Vata body type, or you are more sympathetic nervous system dominant, drinking just plain water with no electrolytes is often not going to allow you to absorb that water to the greatest degree. So I'm not going to get too deep into osmolality today, I should say, and also what's called cell osmosis. So when we look at our cells, there's a certain amount of potassium, which is greater inside of the cells. And outside of the cells, we just call that the extracellular fluid, is going to have a little bit more sodium than potassium. This is how you actually keep cells to retain their fluid, and you allow for the passing of nutrients from outside of the cell to inside of the cell. Well, one of those is actually water, right? So water needs to be able to go into the cells, flush it out, replenish, help clean, take waste out, and bring nutrients in. That's totally normal. Fats help with that. Fats help with more absorbability through what's called the lipid membrane of each cell. But cells need to be hydrated. That's just the way that they are. Well, if there is a lack, now there's a lot of electrolytes to look at. There's calcium, there's magnesium, there's sodium, there's potassium, there's chloride. Those are, for the most part, the main ones. What our bodies often lack, or they're imbalanced, is the sodium and potassium. So sodium and potassium act like a pump. And with that, if you have too much of one, too much sodium, what happens when you have too much sodium? You get swollen. Literally, your body retains a lot more fluid, okay? Now, if you have too much potassium, that's not going to be helpful either. You're going to be more tired, more lethargic, more pushed towards the parasympathetic nervous system. Not good for absorbing water. So what a lot of people need is that balance between sodium and potassium. And I don't want to give you the right profile for you for today, but there are different forms of electrolytes. So some are an equal balance between sodium and potassium. Think of it a 1-to-1 ratio. Some are a 2 to 4 to 1 ratio of more salt to more potassium. And then there are those that might have a little bit more potassium to a little bit more sodium. What I can tell you is this: there's not the perfect electrolyte. There's the electrolyte based on your needs. And again, I don't want to give you the exact one. If you sweat a lot, right? And you can see your t-shirt, your hat, whatever, stained with like a white stain, you're typically someone that needs maybe a little bit more sodium. But at the same time, you don't want to just put in sodium without potassium. And so what we typically do, just to start, if you just want to make your own natural electrolyte, we typically recommend squeezing in a half to 1 whole lemon or lime into water. And then we recommend putting in a pinch of sea salt. And we typically use the Redmond's real salt, and that's only because it's micronized. Himalayan sea salt's great. In Ayurveda, they use a lot of rock salt. That's great too. So all of those are fine. What you do, though, is if you don't taste salt in the water, even though you put a pinch in, your body's telling you probably that's pretty good. Like, that's fine. If ever you're drinking the water and it tastes too salty, it most likely is too salty, right? It's too much for your body, which is telling you you're taking in too much sodium. And you'll often find, though, when you come out of a sauna or in the sauna, your body might say, hey, this is an acceptable amount of salt, right? Because we're sweating out a lot of salt. If we begin to listen to our body a bit more, I think we're going to become more in tune, and we're going to be able to solve those issues to a greater degree. Now, I just want to share one more thing with you, because this was very helpful for me as well. If you are someone that, again, is more of the Vata body type, more catabolic, you might lose weight easier than gaining weight, you might be someone that actually does well with something like smoothies or a little bit of fruit, which has a little bit of that sugar that helps with absorption, because your body is not just going to take in water and allow that to dilute your glucose levels in your blood. And again, I'm starting to get, this is going to be a much bigger topic and gets into a lot of science behind it. But all you need to know is that if you're someone that typically runs lower blood sugar, you're not going to be able to consume 3 liters of water a day with no glucose. It's not going to happen. So now you can get it through smoothies, you can get it through just having some fruit during the day and then just drinking your water, because it will all work together. But it's at least something to think about. If you're someone who just can't absorb water right now, you're chronically dehydrated, think about the different ways that you can better absorb it. Natural, or just electrolytes in general. And if that is not cutting it for you because you see your glucose and it's on the lower side, meaning like in the low 70s or below, you might need just a little bit of glucose. What is that? Well, just a touch of raw honey, wildflower honey, or local wildflower, or Manuka honey, or maybe just a touch of maple syrup. And again, for people that look at the whole world and health as black and white, or I should say it should be various, where it should be different variations of gray, is that you have to understand is that not everybody has high blood sugar, right? Like we have to understand that this whole fear amongst glucose and carbohydrates is totally unfounded, because not everybody's the same. If you are someone that doesn't do well with carbohydrates right now, well, we need to work on that metabolic issue, because it's a metabolic issue. So we need to look at what's going on with thyroid, with cortisol, with insulin, pancreas-based. We need to figure that out. You should be able to eat some carbohydrates. If you can't, it's not the carb's fault. There's a dysfunction with your endocrinology. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It does mean that you should work on those specific things. I think that's important. But some people will never be able to utilize 400 grams of carbs a day, while more of a Vata body type, an ectomorph, could very well use 200 to 400 carbs a day for them, right? And it's not going to cause them diabetes, because we have to understand is we process foods and we process energy, which is from the food, differently. So again, I'm just trying to add a little bit of nuance to the conversation, that no one idea is right. No one person preaching one belief is right. They're all right, essentially, in certain scenarios, but are they a good long-term fix and correction for many, many people? So hopefully this was helpful today. I know, as always, it probably raises more questions than it does answers, but believe it or not, that's the whole goal behind the Cabral concept. The goal is to understand that everything is nuanced. Everything is bioindividuality. However, there are foundational principles, right? The foundational principles lie with, we need about this much water. We need these types of foods to be a healthy human being, to live the longest, healthiest life possible. Now, within that water, within that food, within this exercise, what's the right amount for you? We're going to figure that out. There's 2,400 podcasts previous to this one. Again, the number 2,400 to me is like just zooming on by, right? Zooming on by. To me, it's another day. It's another show. Every single day, my goal is just to bring you what I feel is the best of integrative health, not because I came up with anything, but simply because I've seen so much of my practice, and I have this mission and this purpose to be able to share with you that there is no silver bullet, but you are able to figure it out. You're able to lead the life that you want. Happiness, health, you can have it all. And again, if I can ever help, you just let me know. All right, take care, everyone. Have an amazing day. Please do feel free to share the show with anyone you believe it could serve. Ever wonder what the best sauna, blue blockers, sleep trackers, wake lights, salt lamps, or other health gadgets are? Or what about the top non-toxic mattresses, sheets, soaps, bath products, toothpaste, and cookware? Or would you like to know the cleanest choices for hemp parts, meal delivery services, supplements, and much more? I personally curated, researched, and now created a resource page of all of my top picks that continues to grow each week. These are the exact products I use in my own life, with my family, in my private practice, and they're the ones I trust. To find out all of my up-to-date recommendations and all the details, simply head on over to stephencabral.com/resources.